I'm Julie Baumgardner, and this is the Marriage on the Daily podcast, the podcast designed to give you tools and encouragement to help you do married well on the daily. Because after all, it isn't the grand gestures that make or break your marriage. It's actually what you do or don't do on the daily that either builds a strong foundation or chips away at your core. You can do this, and I'm here to help. Hi, welcome to the Marriage on the Daily podcast. I'm your host, Julie Baumgardner. I am so excited to welcome my friend, Jason VanRuler, to the podcast today. He is a therapist, speaker, author, and coach. He's married to Jody, and they are currently navigating the teen years with 3 young folks in their home. And he has a book coming out that I am so excited about. It's called Discovering Your Communication Type, the 5 Paths to Deeper Connection and Stronger Relationship. Who doesn't need that? We're going to dig into that topic today. Welcome to the podcast, Jason.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Julie. I've been looking forward to this. It's always good to talk with you.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm really excited about this book. When you and I spoke about it a few months ago, I was like, oh, I cannot wait to have a conversation because we just led a marriage retreat recently, and communication, it's the thing. People will often say, we're having lots of conversations, but I don't feel like we're actually communicating as a couple. So I would love to hear from you what made you decide to write this book and what is in the book. Give us a sneak preview.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to. I mean, and I'm sure you've had this experience. Communication is sort of an abstract concept. You know, in working with a lot of couples, they'll say communication's the problem. And I don't know about you, but I'll say, okay, well, what does that mean? And they're like, well, communication. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure if I do. And they're like, well, we just can't talk. And so I think what happens is just kind of right off the bat, it's a little hard to define. Yeah. But it's sort of the glue that holds the relationship together, and it's how we build towards intimacy. And so I'm a person who's been a big fan of the 5 love languages just because I loved kind of the system that it had, and it made some abstract things easier. And so I was like, I love that. It made me think about, why isn't there something like this for communication that could make it easier? And then doing some couples retreats too, there would be times where we'd give couples a script. And we'd say, okay, well, I want you to read this, and this is supposed to help your marriage, and you probably had this experience too, but I'd see some people read the same script with different results. And it occurred to me that that's really odd, because they're seemingly saying all the right things. Mm-hmm. And yet it's not landing with their person. And so what is that about? And so that kind of brought me on the journey of, I want to write a book about communication, but I want to take it and make it as practical as possible. And I want to help people see themselves and others so they can communicate with depth.
Yes. So I love that, because I do think that is exactly what people are experiencing. And so when you are talking about these 5 paths, so to speak, that people can take, what are they?
Yeah. So kind of the heart behind that is, we usually judge ourselves in our communication by our intentions. This is what I meant when I said that. This is my intention. But other people judge us on our words. And so what the 5 paths are really about is, what are the intentions behind, or the why behind what we're saying? Because when we understand that more accurately, we have self-awareness about how it's going to be received by the other person. And so what I came up with is that there's 5 different paths. And basically there's 5 different whys for why we communicate the way we do. And so the first one is it's PATHS, so paths. And the first one is the Peacemaker. And this person, their communication is all about, can I make everybody okay, even if they're not okay? Oh. So I just want peace. And even if it's not peaceful, even if some people have to not talk about something or talk about something, I want to kind of manage the room to make sure the room feels peaceful.
That sounds exhausting.
It's a lot of work. And here's what I'm going to tell you about all of them. There's no best one to have or worst one to have. And the heart behind a lot of it is that a lot of these are simply what we had to adopt as children to live where we lived. So if you can imagine, if you had a chaotic home or a home where there was like a lot of talking or conflict or those things, what would you learn to do as an adaptive child?
Yeah.
Well, you learn to make peace. That's
Yeah.
what you would do.
Yes.
So there's Peacemaker. The next one is the Advocate. That's the A. And the Advocate is about what's right, wrong, and just. And so they're that great friend to have who's going to say the thing no one else will say. They're the people who are going to stick up for you. Those are fun people, but those are people that if they're not careful, they're kind of always looking for a battle. So if they're not careful, they're always sharing their opinion. They're always kind of talking about things that are right or wrong. And as you know, sometimes it's just not that easy. It's just a little more complicated. The T is the thinker. And the thinker is the person that communicates about what they think, what's logical, what's analytical, and they're usually an internal processor. And so to the thinker, it's really important to get it right. They don't want to say the wrong thing. And so they kind of go inward. The H is the harbor, and the harbor is all about feelings. And so they're communicating about not only their feelings, but to make room for other people's feelings. And they could be good or bad or indifferent, but they just want to make space, kind of like a harbor would. And then the S is the spark. And the spark is that person we all know that they walk into a room and it's just electric and they light the whole place up. But the struggle they can have is that if you try to go deep or it gets difficult, they're not always so good at sitting in that spot. And so there's an assessment you can take, and you usually find your primary and your secondary.
Well, as I was just going to ask, how would you know really? I mean, I'm assuming you could ask your spouse.
You could.
What do you think
you hear it. I tell people if you listen well, people will tell you what they are. It'll become pretty obvious from what people talk about. But yeah, you take the assessment and you kind of learn what are the two kind of primary and secondary that I have, and then where do I have opportunities for growth?
And have you found, I'm sure you've already done the assessment a bunch of times with people, and do you find that most married couples are different in terms of their communication skills? Yeah.
Oh yeah, God's got a sense of humor, which I love. Or we do. I mean, because here's what I think. I think we often pick the person we needed to have that we didn't. And so it's wildly attractive to us until it's not. And so, I mean, if you think about like, even in my marriage, I would lead as a harbor. So I'm all about the feelings, right? I'm in a great role as a therapist because, hey, I'm just speaking my language all day. But I chose someone who's a thinker. And I thought, man, that is so attractive. That's just different than me. And so she's always kind of going internal and processing and thinking things through. But what do you think happens when we have a disagreement? Yeah. There's some friction there because we're both going to approach it. Yeah, we're going to approach it with a different why.
So I'm thinking a lot of times people will take an assessment like this and they'll look at their spouse and say, see, this is how I'm wired, and it's just how I'm wired. And you need to see that and deal with that. How would you respond to that?
I would respectfully say that's not what it's for. I get the temptation. We all want to do that. What it's really for, and this is what I told people, is it's so we can listen better. I mean, if you really want to use it well, it's so we can listen better. And it just helps us to know what to listen for, because that's what matters to the other person. So we all kind of have that knee jerk of we go, see, you're this. And that can be very true. And it can be frustrating in its own right. And you're allowed to have feelings about it. But I think if people use it well, it's not to be divisive. It's actually to help us get more connected and just to skip the kind of middle part where we're not really sure how to do that. That's really my heart in the book, is that I want people who maybe weren't taught how to have good relationships and communication learn how to do it quickly and practically.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're talking about feels very natural. You kind of figure out, oh yeah, that's me for sure. And I can totally see that my spouse is something other than what I am. And you're giving practical ideas about how do we figure out how to actually connect well together, which is what every couple, I mean, I have never ever met a couple that hasn't said, I don't really care about connection. They're always trying to figure out, how do we feel more connected? We feel like we're just missing each other.
Mhm. Yeah, it's our greatest desire, I think. And so we all want to get better, even if it's good. But I think we don't always know how. So the book is organized. The first half, it breaks down each of the types and talks through kind of the hallmarks of them and what it looks like and where it comes from, and takes an attachment perspective and personality. So we talk about kind of the origins of those things. And then the second half of the book is, how do we use it to have conversation? So there's a chapter talking about, how do we have conflict knowing what we know? How do we have hard conversations, ask for a boundary, say no? How do we deal with parental estrangement? So what I try to do with that second half is cover all the things where you wish you had some help with communication.
And can you give us a few practical tools from those chapters?
Yeah. I mean, I think if I started with conflict, because that's the one people ask me about an awful lot, is how do we do that better? And you've probably seen this too so often, and I've experienced this being married for a while now, is we get into conflict, but we're not sure why. We're not really in exact agreement about the problem.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a terrible feeling when you know you're mad, but you're not quite sure why.
Why? Yeah. You just know you are.
Yeah, I've had that. I'm like, I'm going to win this thing. I have to be successful. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to win. I'm not really sure why I'm trying to win it, but I'm pretty sure I need to.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I talk about in the book is just the model for conflict that I use with a lot of couples, and I actually use it with leadership teams too. But it's problem, want, and need. And so what we want to do is, can we put the problem in one sentence that we agree on?
Love that.
And a lot of people get stuck right there because they're like, oh, this is a paragraph. And it's like, no. It's got to be one sentence. It's got to be short. It's got to be specific. And then what do you want to have happen to resolve it? And what do you need to have happen? And so the want is kind of the ideal. You know, if I got my way, you'd apologize, you'd change your behavior. This is how it would look. The need is, what do I actually need at a minimum to move forward? And so you might say, I want you to understand me the way that I understand me and do everything the way I want you to, but my need is just that you acknowledge my feelings and you take some ownership. And so the want and the need are a little bit different. But when we go into conflict with the problem in one sentence and the want and the need, it just makes it easy.
Yeah. How do you take that? I mean, I know we talk a lot about, hey, let's don't attack each other. Let's attack the issue. So I love the idea of putting it in a sentence, like, let's define it and be specific about what we're talking about here. And then as you move forward, how do you help couples take the what I want and what I need, even maybe a little bit further to, for our marriage? Like, how do we make this work for our marriage? What does that look like?
Yeah, they have to define what kind of marriage they want to have. So I think that lack of clarity is usually present in a lot of the relationship. You know, it's interesting. I get to work with a lot of businesses, and you know, when you work with a business, they have a plan for everything. You know, they have a mission statement, they have a business plan. It's probably 100 pages. You know, they've got all these things, and then you go, okay, well, let's talk about the most important relationship in your life. What sort of planning do you have? And they're like, I don't know. We've never talked about it. Never really. We don't really have a mission. We're not really pointed in a direction. And so what I try to get couples to do is, let's get pointed in the same direction and decide where we're trying to go together, because then conflict looks different.
Yeah.
If conflict is the thing preventing us from getting to where we want to go, we're both incentivized to solve it. But if we don't know where we're trying to go, we can just get really stuck in the conflict.
Well, you could just be all over the place. I mean, it feels very chaotic, right?
Yeah. There's not a lot of stability or security, which makes conflict heightened.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what other words of wisdom do you have in the book in terms of taking these communication types and making them work for your marriage?
Yeah. Well, let me add one more thing about the conflict real quick, just because I think it could help, and maybe people are wondering. A lot of times, and you probably see this too, I work with people and they go, I don't know what I want, I don't know what I need. And they've never really thought about it. And here's kind of a sad thing is sometimes they've never been asked. So sometimes people literally come to me, and I think it's especially true for moms sometimes when they're trying to raise kids and they're like, hey, Jason, if I talked about what I want or need, I don't know that I'd even get it. And so for the person listening who's like, I don't know what I want or need, it's a great opportunity to figure it out. And so sometimes we'll talk about what you don't want and you don't need. And so people are good at kind of saying, well, yeah, I don't know what I want or need, but I know what I don't want or need. And if they don't know that part, we try some things out.
Mm-hmm.
But something kind of magical happens when someone can say what they want to need, because my experience, at least, is there's a lot of partners out there who want to give it to you if they know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's such a great point. I talk a lot about healthy people ask for what they need. And you don't expect people to be able to read your mind or assume that they don't care because they're not giving you what you need. So it really is important for us to take the time to think about what is it that I need in the season. I can remember when our daughter was younger and I was leading an organization. We would be in these cycles where we were writing grants. They were really big grants. It was very intense work. And my husband and I would sit down and actually have a conversation about, hey, what are the next 3 weeks, next month going to look like? Because I know my time and attention is going to be diverted over here in order for this to be really good. And I also do not want you all to feel neglected. So how can we work as a team to cover all the bases versus either one of them feeling like, man, we don't know what's going on here. And we're certainly, I mean, she's not paying attention to our needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you guys had that talk, because I mean, I think that's the mark of a couple that's going in the same direction, is that they know what they want and they need, and they just show up and provide that.
Yeah.
But I think if we don't know those parts, we're so stuck. And so a lot of people are trying to cram a lot of relationship into a little period of time, which requires clarity like no other. And so if you're not clear on what you want or need, a lot of people are bad guessers. You know, I don't know about you. I'm a bad mind reader. I've tried it a lot. I just been no good at it.
I tell people, if your spouse says, oh, I read your mind, you're like, no, 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 you didn't, because nobody's a mind reader. And I think, gosh, I think that I know they're kind of in jest saying it, but still it gets us in trouble. So
Yeah.
it's better not
It
to
does.
have
And
to
I mean,
guess.
for me, it's usually ice cream. If you're reading my mind, it's usually I'm thinking about ice cream. So I'm probably pretty easy to figure out, but most people are a little more complicated.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what the conflict chapter is about. So there's that chapter. The other one I might just talk about is what do we do knowing our person and the why behind how they communicate. So for instance, if I have a difficult conversation with my wife, whether it's a good difficult or bad difficult or neutral difficult, I know I'm going to want to talk about things that are analytical, some facts. I'm going to throw some logic in there because her ears are going to perk up, right? It's going to kind of land with her. And I know that if I lead with all my feelings, that's not necessarily what she has the most capacity for. And so I'm just going to be aware of that. It doesn't mean I need to be a different person, but it means if I want to communicate deeply with her, I'm going to take her into consideration.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the hard conversations that I've had with my husband. And, the ones where we both walk away feeling like, okay, you heard me. We may not even have resolution at this point, but I definitely feel like you got the gist of what I was trying to say. And like my husband is an internal processor, so he needs a minute. We can have a conversation about something, but he's not going to want to have resolution at that point. He's going to want to go away, think about it a little bit.
Julie, why
and then
can't
come
he go
back.
faster? Come on. Why can't
Trust
he just
me.
go a little quicker?
We spent the first, I don't know, 5 years of our marriage having that conversation. And
Faster, faster,
I,
faster. Yes.
but what I love actually about that is one, it slows me down. I'm an external
Mm,
processor, and I can think as I go, but that slows us down. And instead of me getting frustrated with that, I honestly have learned to appreciate that when he comes back, he will have absolutely thought things through, and he comes to the
mm,
table with thoughtful questions, potential solutions, or just even talking points that take us to a place of thinking further. And in the end, what I walk away feeling is actually closer to him
yeah.
because he took the time and the energy to really think about it and to come back and to have further conversation. And in my mind, that builds intimacy between
Yeah.
the two of us and in our marriage. And so while I would love some faster conversations, I really have grown to appreciate taking a little bit longer and not jumping to, oh, here is the end game for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I think those are our best opportunities to really learn from people we love. And I think those conversations, I mean, they end well when we kind of shift from fighting for agreement and instead of honoring what's different. Because I mean,
Yeah.
here's what I know to be true for me is if I didn't marry the person I married and didn't get to learn about that, I would be at a real deficit because there are rooms where that is a skill to have that I would not have had otherwise.
Yeah.
And so I think when we can kind of shift from demanding agreement to honoring that that's an opportunity to be different, I think, boy, that changes not only our marriage, but every other relationship we have.
So true. And I think about John Gottman and
Mhm.
his research around, there are going to be things that you may not necessarily agree on for the duration of your marriage. And it doesn't mean
No,
you
we can
married the wrong
always work
person.
through it, Julie. We can always get to 100% agreement, can't we? I mean, you and I are
Own up.
talented. We can make that happen. Maybe 95. We're pretty good.
Yeah, I think there are couples who really I think they want 100% on everything.
Yeah.
And when they don't get there, it kind of freaks them out. Like, what's wrong with us? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I think,
And
I mean, I'm gonna off the cuff here, but I think the Gottman quote was, I mean, it was like 69% of problems you have aren't going to be resolved. I think
yeah,
so. I mean, it was a higher than half
yeah,
where Gottman was kind of talking about like that's just not going to be fixed. And if you look at research on change and how how much we'd like to believe people change and how probably actually they do, there's so much of this that I think is an acceptance play where it's accepting the other person, but then deciding to be a student of how they're wired
yeah,
instead of a person who tries to change that.
yeah. We literally were having a conversation with some couples saying, learn how to be a detective.
Mhm.
Really be a good study of this person that you're married to, and like you said, how they're wired and what makes them tick, and the fact that their differences, it's just so easy to look at somebody and think, oh, you're deficient because you don't think exactly the same way I do, versus it isn't a deficiency. It's just different. And what a blessing that A, you're not exactly alike. And two, I loved you said God has such a great sense of humor because he brings two people together. He says, oh, yeah, you are like so different. And I want you to figure out how to look at each other through the eyes of Christ and
Mhm.
figure out how to love each other well. And boy, that's a journey. It's a journey for a lifetime of marriage.
But we're better for it. I mean, the good
But
news
we
is
are.
we're
Yeah.
better for it because that's the point. And I think, we get to witness somebody else's story. And so if we're willing, we get to honor that or we can try to retell it. And so what I'm always talking to couples about is just like witness their story and show up. And one thing that's relevant to the book is that when we get under pressure or conflict, what usually happens is even if we can fake another paths type pretty well,
Mhm.
kind of some of that stuff wears off a little bit. We just are who we are. And so in those
Yeah.
moments, can we love the other person for who they are and how they show up. Because if we can, we're almost always going to work things out.
Yes.
But I
Well,
think when we get together, we're often together and we're trying our best to be everything to each other.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we have that fun time after we get married where we go, oh, this is a little different. This is a different conversation than we might have had before we got married.
Well, and what I actually love about what you just said is that a change is hard. I
Hmm.
mean, I've listened to a lot of neuroscientists talk about how we have to really work. I mean, the things that we're doing now as adults, we've done tens of thousands of times. And so we've created these tracks in our brains. And even when we are intentionally trying to do something different, there's going to be times, like you just said, maybe when there's intense conflict, where you revert back to what you know, to what's
Hmm.
familiar. And I think it's really important for couples to recognize that even when that happens, you can acknowledge, wait a minute, what just happened? I
Yeah.
I honestly did not want to behave like that. It is it is what I have done for a really long time. I'm honestly trying to do something different, and I'm going to keep on trying to do that. I mean, it takes tens of thousands of repetitions to actually get it ingrained in your brain to for that to be the familiar path, right?
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about that, just the scale and the numbers alone, I mean, how long it does take. And so
Mm.
what I'm always talking to people about is make it easy for someone to change by encouraging them along the way. So
Yes.
knowing it's going to take lots of reps to actually make it different, make it easy for the person to keep wanting to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about boundaries. You said that you have a chapter about boundaries. What are the kinds of things that you think are really important for couples to think about when it comes to communication and conflict and boundaries?
Yeah. So I mean, I hear a lot of people use boundaries now as sort of a punitive thing. It's sort of
Mm.
you're punished. Here's a boundary. I'm going to place this on you. It kind of feels like when I had younger kids and we're gonna corral you over here and you can't do this. And I think of boundaries as some other people have discussed it is, it's protecting what matters. But I
Mm.
think how we each show up with our paths type is a little different. The peacemaker's afraid of boundaries because that could wreck the peace, and so the peacemaker is going to show up to that conversation very timid.
Yeah.
And the advocate's going to show up and they're going to talk about how fair it is that they ask for it and if it's just. And the thinker's going to give you probably 10 pages of reasons why that boundary makes sense. And the harbor's going to talk about how they feel about it and why they feel it's a good thing. And the
Mhm.
spark doesn't have a lot of room for boundaries, but if they have a boundaries, they're probably going to drop it and keep running. And
Yeah.
and so what I try to talk people through is like knowing I'm going to show up that way, what do I need to do instead? And how do I develop that skill? So if I'm a peacemaker, how do I develop the emotional regulation to sit in discomfort long enough to say the boundary I have?
Mhm. Yeah. We went to Yellowstone a while back, and I just am so afraid of heights. And
Okay.
we were driving on some roads that had some very significant drop-offs, and there were guardrails there. And so my husband and I were just having this conversation around I think boundaries are a lot like guardrails, and
Yeah.
the guardrails were not put there because I'm necessarily a bad driver. They were
Right.
put there because the road is dangerous.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Oh, so it kind of gives me freedom for sure because I know where the guardrails are."
Yeah.
And when I think about boundaries in marriage, no matter which personality you are, thinking about it from the perspective of, well, this actually gives us freedom in our marriage because there's clarity around where where the guardrails are for both of us. I'm not just assuming what
Mhm.
the boundaries are for us.
Yeah. And I think what can be so healing is when we have those guardrails, it keeps us safe and it keeps other people safe too. and we can show up differently. And so for some people, I think boundaries are guardrails, and I love, because Andy Stanley talks about them as guardrails too, and I love the language with that. And I just think like some of us don't come from a place where those were allowed, and
For
so
sure.
it feels like we shouldn't
Yeah.
even ask.
Like, yeah,
But
restrict.
could you imagine driving those roads with no guardrails?
No, no. And I
All,
don't
all
want to
you
drive
could focus on is the risk, right? I mean, that's all you'd spend your time thinking about is, and it's so funny you say that, Julie, because my wife, very similar. She does not like the high roads where, you know, you look over the edge and it's you know, certain death. She does not enjoy that. So if you don't have those guardrails, you spend a lot of time thinking about the what ifs, not the what's now. And so I think it's so important, but we have to oftentimes learn how to ask because it's not common.
Yes, that's so true. And I guess the other thing I think about is if I didn't have the guardrails, I probably wouldn't go on that road. And I would have really missed out on unbelievable scenery, just
Mhm.
a gift from God. So the safety there allowed me to know where the boundary was to be able to see something incredibly beautiful. And I think the same could be said for our marriages, that
Oh,
they're
what a
there.
good word. I mean, because I think you're right. Some of those roads, I think, to the greatest connection are steep on the sides. And so if
Yes.
you don't have the guardrails, you probably wouldn't go otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd stay where it quote unquote feels safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I always ask everybody,
Yeah.
what would you tell couples is one thing that you would encourage them to do on the daily that could significantly impact their marriage? And I am very curious what you would tell our listeners.
Well, I'll give you two things because I'm an overachiever.
Ooh,
The one
bonus.
thing probably other people have said, so I'll give you a second thing that might be unique. But the first thing is to pray for each other. And I will just tell you, in my marriage, in a lot of the marriages I work with, it feels very vulnerable to do that. But if you are willing to pray with your spouse, and I usually, encourage one person kind of take the lead at that time and get started. It doesn't have to be a complicated prayer. It doesn't have to be a sermon, but just to kind of show up genuinely and authentically and pray, that changes relationships because that builds intimacy. So that's the one I'd say, but maybe that's the one you've heard. The one that I would say I do the most, and it is actually, I kind of got this daily 5 thing where there's 5 things I do every day, but one of the daily 5 is to make Jody laugh. And so when we first got together, believe it or not, she said one of the things she loved best about me was my sense of humor. And so I have just always held on to, if I can make her laugh every day, it signals to her I love her and I'm trying. And it's great to see her laugh. She's got a fantastic laugh. So every day I've got no shame about me. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll try all day. But if I can get her to laugh, I showed her love. And so whatever that thing is, whether it's making them laugh or showing up a certain way, I think you said something good about being a detective is be a student of your person and figure out the stuff that really makes them smile and give it to them as much as you can. And I will tell you, I'm a fairly organized guy in some ways. And so I've got like a list of Jody's favorite things. And I try to think through each week how to do a few of them because I know I'm not always going to be creative. So I just go, what can I do this week that's like her favorite things, no matter how small, but just to show her I'm invested.
I love that. That is awesome. Wow. Thank you so much for a great conversation. I need to know, when is your book coming out so that everybody
Yeah.
can go find it and order it, pre-order it?
Yeah, it's April 14th. And so before that, if you're interested, you can go to my website, and the PATHS assessment to learn which type you are is on there for free. So you can take the assessment, start to learn a little bit about yourself, and then the book is out April 14th.
Okay, well, congratulations on that. That's huge. And thank you again for being with us today. Thank you all so much for joining in. You will be able to find a link to Jason's website in the show notes, and you can find out more information and get updates at marriageonthedaily.com. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you would share it with your friends, because that is how we grow and help other people to grow in their marriage. And until next time, remember, it's the little things that matter on the daily in your marriage.